Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Grell Sound Lab, and today we're going to talk about the frequency response of the Grell OAE2. And luckily I have here with me the developer of the OAE2, Axel.
Hey Jermo. Hi everyone.
And he's a legendary headphone developer who's also worked on headphones like the HE600, HE800 and HE1. So I think we're now in a great space to just analyze a frequency response.
Yes, let's talk about the OAE2s and how they sound. Of course, we are a little bit biased as we are the producer of the OAE2.
So this doesn't help you to know exactly how it sounds, but still we hope that you can learn something. We hope that we can give you some insight.
Some insights why the OAE2 is like that, and that brings you some insights about other headphones and their frequency responses as well.
So just keep an open mind and we'll just dive right in. So here we have the frequency response graph of the OAE2 on a BNK 4128 with an anthropomorphic ear for everyone who cares about that sort of nerdy stuff. The first thing we look at is the bass response. It is, in comparison to other headphones, like the HE650 for instance, quite elevated. So Axel, please fill us in, why may the OAE2 have much more bass than other open headphones?
Well, I think there are two things we have to look at. One thing is that it's not that easy to get a lot of bass in an open type headphone because it's open. In a closed type, it's very simple. You just have the diaphragm compressing the volume in front of the ear. That's easy. For an open one, the pressure went out, and so below the resonance frequency of the driver, so it just drops off. So the resonance frequency of the driver must be as low as possible. Typical resonance frequencies of headphone drivers are somewhere between 80 and 180 hertz, so depending on. So we created something where we pushed the resonance frequency of the driver down to close to 40 hertz. The disadvantage of that is that the sensitivity, so the efficiency of the driver is going down. So you need a little bit more of energy to drive it, but I think that's no problem. So the system has an impedance of 38 ohms. When you put in 1 volt, you get out 100 dB SPL, so that is quite loud. So that's more than enough. Yeah, you have this very good low frequency response.
Just to finish it off basically is that if you look at the Harman research, for instance, they've also shown that most people prefer quite a bit of a bass lift in headphones. And for the Harman research, open type headphones were used because it's better for the research to have less variation. So something like the HE500 series or AKG K712. And there also people showed that they preferred quite a good bass boost, which is in normal dynamic headphones not present. I think this is supported also by a very big body of research, which is quite validated.
And the other thing is, I don't know why, a lot of people thought in the past that bass is something that is not nice in audiophile or high-end headphones. They avoided to have bass in them. I think bass is a fundamental, or the fundamental part of music. So 2-3 octaves of music are just bass. From 20 to 40, 40 to 80, and 80 to 160. So this is the bass range where the last octave is going into the fundamentals of voices already. But for me, this is the bass range, and this should be heard. So a lot of that is with loudspeakers, it's only felt with the body. But with headphones, you don't have this body channel. So it's very important to have enough bass in the headphone so that your brain synthesizes this felt bass in a way so that you have the same impression as if the sound is produced by speakers or produced by an organ or a contrabass, or when you're listening to electronic music by the speaker system. This is why and how we achieve the bass response of the OAE2s. So it's my approach to bring the bass to the people. It's not too much, it's not over exaggerated, it's just the right amount of bass that should be there.
But so much on the topic of bass. And now let's move on to the next segment, which is the mids, and where I think the OAE2 is probably the most usual in terms of the entire frequency spectrum. And you can see it's very, very flat across the board. Basically, the voices, everything, where this is where all the music sits. Basically, it should sound very natural to almost every person. I think the one little deviation, if you can call it like that, compared to something like an HE650, would be the upper mids, something like 2 to 3 kilohertz, which is compared to this HE650, which sounds a bit in your face. Compared to that, it is a bit toned down. And this is not really novel. So there's a lot of headphones out there that are decreased in that range. So the HD800 is...
HD800, for example.
Yeah, exactly. That is very famous. Also the HG1 a little bit. There is a precedent for that, a very good one. Axel, why is that the case in these type of headphones maybe generally? And what does it help you when you are listening to something?
So frequency response is not everything. We talked about that already.
Yeah.
But when you have more in the range, so at 2 kilohertz, somewhere there, everything is very close to you or in your head. So a good example for that is headphones like HE25s, which are made to control sound for sound engineers, not to mix sound, but to listen very deep into failures, everything. There it's good. When you reduce that range, you feel more of the room. You have this room information more present to you, and it opens the space. And how is it made? When you look inside the volume here for the ears, it's quite big. So the speaker, the pressure is not boosted, but it's more like that. And so this is what I wanted to achieve. I could even make it a little bit smaller, but so it's, I think, perfect in this case. It's not as low as in the HD800. So the room is not like that. It's more homogeneous. This is what I wanted to achieve.
That is, I think, all we can already talk about with the mids. It's super neutral, and I think that is the biggest mark also of a high-quality headphone, that the mids are quite even. If there's big peaks or dips there, then usually it sounds a bit honky.
Yeah, and you see a lot of headphones out there where you have funny frequency responses for the mids. No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think we can then go on to the most interesting part, let's say, of the frequency response of the OAE2. That has to do now with angle transducers, with a key feature, I think, of the headphones. That has a big impact on how the treble needs to sound, or how it needs to be measured, and also how you, in the end, listen to it. It does have both an impact on the target that you should have when developing the headphone, and also what you want the listeners to hear. If you compare now the OAE2 to an HD650, then you see really a big, I would say it is relatively comparable up to something like maybe 5 or 6 kilohertz, and then it starts to diverge quite a bit, and it measures quite a lot lower. So what's up with that?
Yeah, so there is no frequency response in the treble range independently from the ear that is used to measure it. It's always depending on the ear, and that is good because everybody is hearing sound with his own or her own ear, and so that is influencing the frequency response at the eardrum very much. And the more the ear or the Pinna is influencing the frequency response in this high frequency range with a headphone, the closer the frequency response is what you are hearing with loudspeakers or when you're listening to natural instruments. This is the reason why we put the transducer in this position, because this is the position where the speakers are in a recording studio, and the mixes and most of the recording studios, so 95%, are made with loudspeakers, not with headphones. Sound should come from that direction, and when you place the speakers of the headphones in that direction, so it brings the sound to the outer ear from the same angle as from speakers. So you have a very similar frequency response there depending on the outer ear. I've done measurements about that, how different ears create different patterns. So the OAE2 is much closer to this pattern produced by loudspeakers than, for example, an HD650. This is not something that makes the HD650 bad, but the HD650, the transducer somewhere here over the ears, that is very similar to loudspeakers in this or that direction, directly to the ear. This is not how is it meant, but at that time when I created the HD650, it was normal to have headphone speakers here, and it was a process to bring them to this position. So when you look at different Sennheiser headphones, so they're moving more and more into this position. Okay, this is not a Sennheiser headphone, it's a Grell headphone, but it is my approach to create the right frequency response for the high frequency range.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we can just go a little bit into sort of visualizations, into data, and show you the graph so you understand that, or can better follow that thought process, because it's quite complex. So first, just on HRTFs, which determine basically what sounds natural to our ears from different angles. And here, for instance, if you have sound arriving really from the side, then you get quite a lot of treble. And the reason for that is that if you fire the treble really directly into the ear canal, then there's nothing obstructing it, and you get basically the full power. And on the other hand, if you get it from a 30-degree angle from the front, then you get a lot less treble energy, because you don't have a direct way to the ear canal, but you have a lot of cancellations, some resonances as well, of course, but overall the energy will be much lower. So that is something that can see here directly. And the interesting part is that it sounds natural both ways. If you hear something from the side and it has that amount of treble energy, then that sounds natural. But if you hear it from the front and it has a bit less measured treble energy, then it still sounds very natural. The reality is that it needs to correspond basically to where our ears expect the sound to come from. But that is the thought process of why a headphone that has the driver situated directly next to the ear, why it needs a bit more measured treble than a headphone that has the drivers more situated to the front. That is basically the idea of that different driver placements should have also different measured treble levels. The other topic is then, of course, what is now the big advantage of having it mounted more to the front, and that is what Axel just told us about, which is basically the Pinna interaction. And the trial that he made here is, this graph is not 100% easy to read, but in a sense, the experiment was as follows, that you have a measurement head with a small set of ears inserted, so the ears are very small, and then it recorded the frequency responses of an OAE2, of an HE650, of loudspeakers, and then those ears were exchanged with very big ears, and again were measured with these 3 devices under test. And now the graph shows basically the difference between both measurements. What we think is that a good headphone should simulate the change that you would also see in a loudspeaker, because that would indicate that loudspeakers are much more natural sounding, of course, than headphones. And if a headphone has a similar change to the loudspeaker, then it would mean that it adapts to your personal anatomy. And incidentally, that is something that you can see very well here. So in yellow, you have the loudspeaker, and in green, the OAE2. And you see that the peaks and dips of the OAE2 correspond really quite well with the loudspeaker. So that's really an extraordinary agreement. And the HE650, in contrast, seems to be sort of random. And I mean, that's to be expected because it fires directly into the ear canal and is not influenced that much by the Pinna. So obviously there are changes, but it doesn't correspond as much to a loudspeaker.
What you can see here, the yellow curve, of course, is a little bit not that flat because it's speakers in the room. The peaks of the OAE2 are very strong because there is no room so for the speaker, there are reflections from here and there. And so the differences are a little bit flattened by this room influence. So you don't have the room influence with the headphones. So they're more behaving like a perfect near field monitor, something like that. But the HE650, as you see, is not reacting that much to the ears as with the speakers or with the OAE2.
Exactly. Now we talked about why in our mind the treble measurement should be different, and it is very different. But now the important part is, of course, how does it sound? Because if you have such a big difference in the treble levels, and we see here that it's around 10 dB in some parts, so that is quite massive, then it should, according to like frequency response purists, it should also sound much different than in something like an HE650. Of course, we cannot give every viewer here an OAE2 and have them listen to it for themselves. But in our opinion, it is really quite close.
Trust me, there is enough treble. It's really crispy. It's really everything that you expect. There is enough treble.
Yeah.
But you said one thing before, that you expect an amount of treble or something depending on the direction where it comes from. But when you have this high amount of treble energy firing directly in your ear canal, something is happening. It's not that you feel directly it's too much, but you feel after a while that this kind of hearing fatigue. This is something that doesn't happen with this headphone. So it's not that you feel there's less treble, and with HE650 there's more treble. But after listening for hours, you will feel more hearing fatigue with a headphone that is firing directly in your ear canal. This is one of the differences. And of course, the rendering of rooms and stuff like that is working better with this position as well. It is not meant, and this is important, this positioning of the drivers here is not meant to get the sound right in front of you, especially in the middle. It's not possible this way. You need to have a head tracker and something like that to get really the sound out of the head, but you have a better room rendering in your brain.
Beyond that, the headphones are already in the market now for almost 2 months here in Germany, and we also send it out to reviewers and of course to business partners, and we've gotten really, really positive feedback. I think it is a very good testament to, even though the headphone has measurably less treble than what I would say is currently the standard in the market, you will see that perceptively it sounds just supernatural. I really invite you to try out the headphones if you get the chance. It's, I think, a very exciting step forward in the sense that it gives you really a very novel idea of what sound should be like, what a headphone should be like, and where you wonder, why did people do it so differently for 30 years or even longer, when this makes much more sense.
Yeah. So all the treble energy is there.
Yeah.
When you measure it with a probe microphone in front of the driver, the energy is there. The dips are only resulting from the reflections and resonances with this interaction with your Pinna. And this Pinna interaction is very important, but this is something we said before, and we will have something more about that later. One more thing about the treble response. You see these dips and peaks and so on. And when you compare that with the Harman curve, which is just a flat slope, the Harman curve is an averaged curve, an average of a lot of curves and flattened, smoothened in the high frequency range. So I think you can look at that, but in reality, on a dummy head or on a natural ear, there should be these characteristic peaks and dips, and the Harman curve, to get it flat like that, it's not on a dummy head, it doesn't make sense, because then you have to add in some frequency ranges a lot and take out in some others something, but on a different ear it looks differently, so it doesn't make sense to make it flat on a dummy head.
To add to it very, very briefly, so if you look at HRTFs, they're all completely different and they're all completely jacked, so it's natural that it looks like that. And the other part is that the dimensions of the dummy heads of the coupler, they determine really what it looks like there. So it's very small spaces, and at something like 10 kilohertz, the wavelength is also incidentally something like 3 centimeters. If you just have a dimension, a cavity in there which has half of that dimension, then you will get a very strong cancellation, and so you often see a dip around 10 kilohertz. That's natural, and if you take a very high quality headphone driver, just in a normal baffle like a loudspeaker, and measure it, usually it's quite smooth. That is the reason why headphone and loudspeaker measurements are so different in that region, and why it can't be smooth for headphones. That's the reality.
Yeah, I think that's it from my side about the Treble.
Yeah, and I mean, that's also the end of the frequency response, so we will not look at ultrasonics today. And I also can't hear ultrasonics, unfortunately. At least I think I can't. We hope you enjoyed that. We try to put in some educational content in there. And please give us your feedback on basically what you think about it. Also, for instance, the idea of basically shaping the frequency response to manipulate a little bit what you hear. So the space in the headphones, for instance. So there's not only the goal of neutrality, but also the goal of making sound very enjoyable. Yeah, and I think the OAE2 is really a great entry in that direction.
If you want to know more about what is important in the frequency response curve or what is not important, have a look at our episode 9. And if you want to know more about what's going on in the Harman curve and why it's good or not, have a look at episode 8.
That's it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching and for being such an engaged community. So we really enjoy all the comments we get, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.